Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Titleless Musings, and today I have a very different genre of video for you because today I'm musing on reading. I did a yearly recap where I talked about some of my top books of 2025 as well as some of my least favorites, and it just got me thinking that I wanted to talk a little bit about my kind of accomplishments with reading in 2025 as well as the goals for 2026, some of the software I use, and some general thoughts on the Bookish communities. So that's what I'm going to talk about today while I play this B-roll. I'm going through like my physical TBR, but I'll also show off like my reading journal and a couple of the apps that I use. So you'll be able to kind of see that while I talk. Before I get into the first section of this video, I am going to add a couple of caveats. First of all, obviously these are just going to be my opinions. I may talk about some books just to give examples of what I'm talking about, but I won't be reviewing books fully here. But obviously my opinions may differ from yours both on books or genres or comments that I have on the bookish communities. So we can totally have constructive criticisms and discussions in the comments down below. I'd love to know what you guys think on all this. Second, and kind of the final caveat that I'm going to add, since I said I'm going to talk a little bit about bookish communities, I want to make it very, very clear right now that my comments are on the state of the system and not on the individuals. So if I'm, for example, talking about my thoughts on physical TBRs, I am not talking specifically about any one creator, I am just talking about it as a whole within the community. Alright, that's almost 2 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and get straight into the first section of this video. 2025 was kind of a big reader accomplishment year. I don't want to say I did anything spectacular necessarily as a reader, but I got kind of into my stride with things. I found out like apps that work and I don't want to call them reading schedules, but reading schedules for lack of a better word. In 2025, I ended up reading 100 books. I almost only read 99 because I finished my 99th book on December 26th. But it was a book I really didn't like at all, so I ended up reading one more thinking that, I had to end on a good note, and luckily the book was really good. The final book I read was P.S. You're the Worst. I really liked that book, actually. It was really nice. And I finished that 20 minutes to midnight, so I barely hit the 100 kind of reading goal challenge, and I think this is the first time I've ever hit it. In 2023, I think I only read 10 books. And then in 2024, I'm pretty sure I did like 20. So it was obviously a massive gap. I had a lot of free time last year to read in between things, if that makes sense. So I just kept getting books out from the library, kept reading them, and yeah, I thought that was really good. My other kind of accomplishments in 2025, I really tried to branch out what I was reading. As you can see here, I'm just showing some of the books that are on my physical TBR that I need to get around to reading or to rereading, and I am like a die-hard historical fiction fan. That is my main genre of interest. But in 2025, I branched out into speculative dystopian fiction, which I love. It was a stunner of a category. The first book was it the first book I read for that? One of the books that I read for that category was The Warehouse by Rob Hart, which was really, really interesting. I also read romance for the first time. Well, I say first time. I have read, I own a Tessa Bailey book. I think I own It Happened One Summer. But I don't vibe with that book. I just don't think Tessa Bailey's writing is for me. But I gave Emily Henry a shot in 2025. As you can see, I ended up buying Funny Story because I really liked it. So that was, again, a good step. Perhaps the biggest step, though, that I made was fantasy. I have never, ever been a fantasy reader. Growing up, I was like a big Hunger Games kid. So I am much more like dystopian, end-of-world times kind of reader. But I'm not really a big fantasy reader. I never got into Harry Potter or anything like that. But in 2025, I decided to read ACOTAR. And then I also got recommended Quicksilver and Powerless, which I'm going to read this year. But I don't want to say it was like a complete waste of time because I just didn't vibe with the ACOTAR series, if I'm being completely honest. I think it's a very overhyped series. Book 1 I gave like 2.5 stars. There were issues with it, but I was willing to let it go because obviously that was the first book in a series, and things may not have been plot holes, they just may not have happened in the first book. Book 2 is the one that everyone talks about. Mist and Fury is the one that everyone says is like the top book, and it was better than book 1, but it still didn't kind of like grab me, I guess. Wings and Ruin, which is book 3, was my favorite in the series. I gave that 4 stars. I was so emotional. I was crying so hard at the end of that book. And then I made the mistake of reading Frost and Starlight. And again, this is absolutely no shade. If you enjoy the ACOTAR series, absolute more power to you, because I hope that you enjoy the series. But Frost and Starlight for me should have been the point that I stopped reading, because I just didn't enjoy it. The novella I thought was like going to be a nice little kind of shorter book before I read Silver Flames, and I didn't like it at all. It kind of put me in a bit of a slump. I had to wait until 2026. I literally just finished reading Silver Flames right before I filmed this, and yeah, I think for me, I probably should have stopped at Wings and Ruin. In 2026, I'll probably look at other Sarah J. Maas books, but yeah, ACOTAR for me was kind of one of my flops of 2025. Another one of my accomplishments was being a more comprehensive reader. Now, I know that that sounds so boring. It sounds like something we used to do in school. It quite literally is, though. I found that I was taking the books in, but I wasn't really comprehending them, if that makes sense. I was very much just reading the words. So I challenged myself to start taking notes, start like keeping quotes that I liked, and then also write reviews of the books when I'm done. Obviously, this is not like you have to do this as a reader, but it was a big accomplishment for me because I found myself really just diving into books more, and I also found myself finding it easier to point out what I didn't like about a book. So if I DNF'd a book, for example, I could then point to it and say, but this specifically is what I didn't like, as opposed to just saying, well, I just didn't vibe with it. So that was really helpful for me, like I said, an accomplishment I had in 2025. And yeah, those are kind of like the big accomplishments that I wanted to list off before I get into other categories. So let me now move on to category 2, which is my 2026 reading goals. So I got through my little 2025 section pretty quick. That was on purpose. Like I said, I am going to divide this video into sections, so I'm going to just move straight on to section 2 and kind of give you the broad level before section 3 we go more into detail. So my goals for 2026, I am honestly keeping a pretty low profile as a reader this year. I don't think I'm going to hit 100 books. If I do, it'll be a miracle, but that's not, I don't like to set myself like a, oh, I have to read 100 books, I have to read 50 books, because life does happen. I think we forget that a lot as readers. Most of us are able to kind of take like a book with us if we're like waiting for a train or something like that, and read, in between different events, but life still happens, and that's why I really just don't like saying, oh, I'm gonna read X amount of books. My kind of main goals for how many books I'm going to read, I want to do at least one reading challenge this year. I'm doing a couple of local library challenges, or I'm like keeping track of books for those. But then I'm also doing the 40 book Pop Sugar challenge and the 52 and 52 one, which is actually going pretty good so far. I was quite impressed. And then just like a personal challenge for myself, looking here at my physical TBR, I want to read one physical book a month. I'll talk about this in section 3 when I talk about the changes I've made and my kind of thoughts on bookish content, but I really had kind of an unhaul and just an analysis of myself last year, because I fell down a lot of different rabbit holes that I haven't talked about on YouTube before in terms of like comparison. So trying to get through a book a month here is what I'm hoping to do. I already finished my January book, which I'm very glad about because I didn't enjoy it. But other than that, I'm not kind of holding myself accountable to a certain number of books. The other kind of goal is to keep up with this annotation. Now that I actually have little annotation tabs, I do want to annotate my physical books. Like I said, I don't write on my books. There's a very good reason why I don't do that I'll talk about in a little bit. But I haven't really engaged as much with my physical books as I'd like to. And I think that I need kind of that. I need to be forced a little bit to pay attention. I am not going to sugarcoat it. I have the attention span issue that we all joke about from, short form content. I definitely have a very hard time putting my phone down and just being in the moment and reading a book. So, my goal with 2026 is to continue annotating and to keep doing those reviews. My other goal, and I'm not gonna super duper hold myself to this right now because I do have a lot of videos planned already. But I would like to try and do like a monthly review of the books I've read. I think it would just be interesting. I love talking about books. I wish I talked about them more. That's kind of why I wanted to explore this branch of my content. But I love watching people talk about their best and worst books and getting recommendations and, hearing about the books they enjoyed. And I really think that I might be able to provide some different insight. I am definitely a mood reader, but I don't read specific genres. I have favorite genres, but I try and read a little bit from every category. So I think as well that I could maybe provide some interesting books that you guys might not have heard of. My final challenge for 2026, or I shouldn't call it a challenge, it's a goal. My reading goal for 2026, I would like to have at least one 5-star read a month. Now, that is obviously going to be difficult. You have to read the book to determine if it's going to be a 5-star or not. But I really just want to see if I can find like a 5-star read every single month. Because I'll be honest, it gets a little bit infuriating sometimes. I know last year I just kept hitting book after book that I wasn't enjoying. I DNF'd quite a few in a row, and it gets disheartening because you're like, well, is it me? Am I picking the wrong books? I kind of had like an issue with anxiety about DNFing books, which is a whole other kettle of fish. But I really want to push myself to find a 5-star book every month and to have that kind of be a comfort read. I reread books, but I don't reread them as often as I'd like. So I think finding books that I really enjoy and connect with might help that sort of reader imposter syndrome. That is my reading goals for 2026. Again, quite short, quite to the point, because in section 3, I am going to ramble a little bit about the community, my apps that I use, some of the things that I think about, different book trends. I'm basically just going to give you a bit of a blabbing section while I talk about it. So without any further ado, let's jump to section 3. So I tried to keep the first 2 sections of this video very succinct. I didn't want to go on for too long, but this third part of the video is going to be a little bit longer, a little more rambly, and that is because in this section I'm going to be talking about like software and apps and just some general thoughts that I have on the Bookish community, and also just some like things that I started doing as a reader that you might find interesting. So I'm going to start with software because the B-roll has now switched to the software that I want to talk about. And this is an app called Calibre. Now, you can download this for Windows, Mac, or Linux, and it is by far one of my favorite bits of software to use. It is free, it's open source, so you can just download it. If you just look up, I think it's like Calibre ebook is what I searched for. You can find the website. It's got easy instructions on how to install it. The thing that I like about Calibre, I guess I should tell you kind of why I found it and why it's so important to me as a reader. I used to have a Goodreads account going way, way back, but I canceled like my Amazon Prime. I don't have an Amazon account anymore, and I really just I don't want to have another Goodreads account. I don't feel like supporting Bezos like that. But I also I didn't like things like the story graph. I like the concept of websites like the story graph, but the thing is that, like, everything has to have an account these days, which, like, I understand in this perspective, obviously, you have to have an account because it's tracking, your books, your reading. I understand that, but as we've talked about before on this channel about, like, physical media and all that, what worries me is if the Storygraph ever got shut down, or it got bought out, or switched to a subscription service, I would worry about losing all of the information that I had on there, so, like, my TBR and my reading stats, etc. So that is basically how I came to Calibre. Now, Calibre is an ebook database kind of app. It's fully run local on your machine. You you basically get to input all of that information, and I know that it sounds very tricky. I've kind of got the way that I bring books into it, I've got that playing in the background so you can kind of see how it works. It really is not that difficult at all. I know a lot of people use this, like if they buy ebooks, for example, a lot of people will connect like their Kindles or their Kobos to this so that they can send the books to their e-readers. For me, this is basically a really, really complicated Excel spreadsheet. So Caliber describes itself as an ebook manager. I'm reading off of the website because it describes it way better than I ever could. But it is completely free. Like I said, it's open source. You get to run it locally on your machine, so you don't have to worry about having an account or anything like that. What I like about this is it can really be adapted to whatever you want to use it for. Like I just said, for me, this is basically a big spreadsheet. I personally don't purchase ebooks, but I do read ebooks from my local library. So for me, I like to keep track of like all the books that my libraries have and, you know, whether I've read them, when I read them, the rating I gave. And I also, like for me personally, I annotate and like make comments on books while I read them. So having a place, you can see I have like a personal review section. Having a place where I can kind of keep all of this information about reading in one place is so helpful. The thing that I think kind of worries me about the way I've described it a little bit. I said that this was like a complicated, a complicated Excel spreadsheet. It's not hard to use. It is very, very simple. I have it quite complex. I have it set up, with like tags that, generate different columns. I'm trying to figure out like the way to describe this because I set it up so long ago. But you can have it as complicated as you want. I have kind of gone down to the Python code level with some of the things that I've done with it, but you don't have to do that at all. There were things that I wanted to do with it that the app, you can download the plugins and kind of mess with the code. You don't have to be that serious about it at all. You could literally just download it and use it as is. All of the columns and stuff you can do without having to download any plugins, although I do recommend taking a look at plugins. Your plugins, as you can see on the top there, where like the add books, the edit metadata, that's where all your plugins are kept. So I have things like a reading goal, which tracks all the books that I read in a year. I also have like the count pages thing, so that it'll, count pages. But it is so good. It's a great ebook manager. And like I said, you don't actually have to buy ebooks to use it. I literally just use this to create basically folders that hold all of my notes. If you're a writer, you might compare this to Scrivener. That's kind of like the level that this is. It's really good. But like I said, it's also completely free and open source. Here I'm just scrolling through like my cover browser. I only pulled this up so that you guys could see it. But I basically have all these books now that I can click on, I can edit the data for. Like I said, I can have it count pages. It's so helpful. In terms of like, where does it replace Goodreads? It's been a while since I used Goodreads, I admit. You can't, obviously, you can randomize a book, and if you own the book, obviously it'll open. You can still randomize it even if you don't own the book. It'll just take you to a random folder and then obviously tell you it can't open anything, but then you'll have a random book selected kind of thing. You can also sort by tags. I have one that sorts by tags and by genre, so the tags pull straight from Goodreads, with the Goodreads plugin that you can download on the mobile read forums. But you can also have ones that are like genres. I go through here in a second and show you what that looks like. You can also sort on things like authors and series, or if you read in different languages, you can sort on that. I only read in English, but I do have an Italian book on here, and I don't know how I got it there. But yeah, this is one, like I said, that I don't hear a lot of bookish content creators talk about. And I think it's a bummer because this is really, really good. I will add a little caveat that I hope you take to heart, which is that obviously do your own research before you download anything. I mean, not even just from me, from anybody that recommends you software. Please do your own research. I don't have anything to gain out of this. I'm not sponsored by this. I'm only recommending it to you as a potential thing that you might want to look into. And I would argue as well, like, this can be used even if you are a more casual reader. I know that, some people will only read a handful of books each year because they really want to write, in-depth reviews about that. But if that's something you want to do and you don't want to have to worry about that review being public or anything like that, obviously, as I've done here, you can create a long text box and have it all in your app. And again, if you are a little bit, more of a spreadsheet, a computer geek, whatever, you can also make it a bit more complicated, and you can track things, like I said, like your reading goals, and have all the plugins interact. It doesn't have to be difficult, and I do appreciate as well with the plugins and all that, they link to both they link to GitHub and the mobile read forums. So if you're ever having any issues where you're like, I don't understand how this works, I don't understand how to set this up, you can find that super duper simply. There's a lot of people that work on these plugins, and it is up to date as of, today. I'm filming this on January 12th, but it is update as of today. So that was kind of the first bit of software that I wanted to talk about. So let me pause now to get into a different bit of software. So for our second bit of software, we are actually jumping to a different device. This is my iPad. I got an iPad last year. I was gonna get a Kindle, but I don't want to support Amazon. And then I was looking at Kobo's, and I like Kobo's, but I didn't necessarily think that it was worth that for the money. So for Black Friday, I invested in an iPad, and that allowed me to do something very cool, which you are now seeing here. So this next bit of software is not like a TBR manager or anything like that. This is where I manage my digital reading journal. So again, I'll start with the story of how I came about this. When I got the iPad, I thought that it might be interesting to start keeping a digital journal because I gave up on doing a physical reading journal. I just don't have enough resources to print book covers. I also would feel like I wanted to make like mood boards for books, but I just don't have enough money to buy all the paper and ink for the printer that would need. So coming over to the iPad, I thought it was a really good opportunity for me to actually get a digital reading journal set up. So I did as most of us do. I went straight to YouTube and I started watching like journal flip-throughs and digital reading journals and iPad journals, and I basically scoured the web for it, and everybody keeps talking about GoodNotes. Now, I was going to buy GoodNotes. I'll start with that. I was going to buy GoodNotes. I was going to invest, I think it's like $30 to get the one-time purchase. But I thought, a bit like I encourage you guys to do, I went and checked, the app for myself. I went and looked at it. I went and looked at the subscription. I kind of did some research outside of YouTube. And I realized that people don't like GoodNotes as much as YouTube would convince you that they do. I think if you've ever watched any reading journalers, you've probably seen them suggest GoodNotes at some point. And that's not I want to make it very clear, I'm not coming at those people at all. Whatever apps you use are completely your choice. That's your money to spend. But when I was doing my research, I found a lot of people talking about the fact that they don't like GoodNotes because it is just not as good as it was. It's using AI a lot now, which I don't want AI anywhere near my creative processes. So I then kind of went on this search for trying to find a digital notebook where I didn't have to have infinite canvas. I also wanted something where I could like move the text and the pictures around. And that's when I came across the app that you're seeing on the left, and that is Noteful. So Noteful is obviously not the first notebook app to ever be around. You can download it for free, which I do highly recommend doing to give it a try. You actually don't ever have to pay for Noteful if you don't want to. Noteful for free gives you 3 notebooks. To put it in perspective, I'm using, I think, is it 5 now, I think? I've got a digital reading journal, a sticker book, a personal journal, a K-pop journal. A tracker journal. That's my 5th one. So I did obviously end up using more than the 3, and I bought the app. It's a $6.99? $5 or $6.99, I think, outright, USD. To get a one-time purchase, you have access to the whole app, and that is what I decided to do, and I really, really like this app. I have a lot to say about the app. It's really, really good. There's a few things it doesn't do. It doesn't have, like, GoodNotes, I believe, has the, like, handwriting adjustment if you use a stylus or an Apple Pencil. This can't do that. You can still use the Apple Pencil to write and convert it to text, or you can use, as you can see I'm doing here, you can use like the little paintbrush fountain pen selection to actually write with your Apple Pencil if you want to. Um, that's really about it. It's basically the same as GoodNotes in every other way. You can import PDFs, you can save. I save like all of my page templates to the Files app that comes local with the iPads, and then you can import them and have them as templates. You can move text around, you can have it auto draw shapes based on, like, if you draw a square, for example, and you hold on the last line, it'll correct it into a perfect square. And like I said, the biggest thing for me is I love the fact this has no AI features. I don't want generative AI at all in any of my creative processes. I don't think that generative AI is the way forward. So I don't want an app that has that feature at all. So I appreciate that about this. I also just really like the fact that you never have to actually pay for this. Like I said, it is free. You get 3 notebooks completely for free. And those notebooks, as far as I know, can be as long as you want them to be. So you could give it a try if it's something you're interested in, just see if you like it. GoodNotes, I don't think actually even lets you get past the first screen anymore, because I was about to buy GoodNotes, and it wasn't until I went and looked and saw that people were like switching apps that I stopped. But again, you can use this completely for free if you wanted to. The other thing that I love so much about this is that it's not infinite canvas. I am a self-proclaimed hater of infinite canvas. I gotta be honest, it doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for my journaling. I like to have my digital notebooks as similar to my physical notebooks as possible, and that is what this allows me to do. So, as you can see here in the background while I've been talking, I have been setting up my digital reading journal. All of these spreads are like inspired by other creators and things that they've done, but I've done them myself on here. So no, I won't be, like, I'm not gonna sell these spreads or anything like that. You're more than welcome to pause the video and like copy or trace it. Totally fine with that. I'm not gonna be selling these on like an Etsy or anything. But I have really tried to set this up to work for me. I drew my little cover for my little reading journal, and then I have like a library page, which is all the book covers, and then if you click on the images, you can actually link to other pages, whether that be a web page or a page within the notebook that you're working in. And basically what that allows you to do is say, here's, well, like what I'm working on now, here's a Court of Silver Flames. If I then click and hold on the book cover, it'll take me to the spread that I made about the book. The other things that I've tried to do with this, I have book mood boards, and those also have links within the individual spreads. And those are basically like boxes, just a box of images that I pull from like Pinterest or Google or whatever. Here you can also see I've got like the summary of the book, I've got quotes for the book, and then my reviews for each book. I love that. I love keeping track of quotes that I enjoy reading. And it really allows you to do whatever you want. For 2026, and kind of going back to the reading goals that I spoke about, I'm doing a bunch of different reading challenges in 2026, so I have pages for each. The one that you saw me doing for Silver Flames was both for the Rainbow Reading Challenge, where you read a book cover in each color, and I also did it, it's not Pop Sugar, what's the other one? Oh, the 52 and 52 Club. I think is the one where you have to read a book with a map. So that one went there. I've got pages to then keep track of all that. This is what I was talking about with the mood boards. It's so nice to have a digital journal where I'm not having to print anything. I will talk a little bit more about this app in my actual journal video, because I'll be going over like my personal journal and my K-pop journal in that, but I really, really like Noteful a lot. I think, like I said, I don't think that like creators are trying to lead you astray or anything like that. GoodNotes for a time really was great. I actually used it like years and years and years ago before they moved to a subscription model, and I really enjoyed it, but it's not what it used to be. And I think that it's difficult to then kind of talk about other apps because you're always comparing it to GoodNotes, because GoodNotes really was good at what it did. But Noteful has the same abilities. And the other thing I like, and this is kind of the last thing that I'll say before I move on to other thoughts, but the thing I like about Noteful is the one-time purchase. I know, especially in 2026 and 2025, that a lot of people just can't afford to do subscription models. A lot of people can't even afford the $6.99 at all. And so I appreciate that I can come to you guys and recommend you guys something that can actually be used for free. Like I said, I'm not getting paid. I'm not sponsored. I paid out of my own pocket for this app. But I like the fact that it's not breaking the bank expensive, and I'm also not having to worry about paying month after month. For me, this was a good investment. I have gotten so much use out of it, and I only bought it back in November. So that $6.99 for me was completely justifiable. Obviously, like I said, I think that like if you are looking for, an app to use, definitely give this one a try. Take a look at it, try it for free. I don't know if it's on Android or not. You may have to fact check me on that one, but it's called Noteful, and I highly recommend it. And also for kind of my viewers that are a little bit more into graphic design, like I use Affinity Photo all the time. This has both image layering and also freehand crop tools. The image layering is definitely one of the biggest perks, I think, of this. You can obviously build your graphic layers out, and that's what I did with like my trackers, so that I make sure I'm never going over the boxes that I drew. So it also, like I said about, Caliber, you can use this if you're just a casual user looking to set up a fun little notebook, or if you're looking to make it a little more complicated and you know a little bit more about graphic design, you can use that here too. So those are my 2 bits of software that I want to recommend. Like I said, I'm not sponsored. Please go ahead and take it outside of this video. Go do your own research. Don't just take me at face value. Make sure that you're looking into these as well. But if you are looking for things that are either a little bit more affordable or a little bit less well-known, a little bit less likely to, just disappear or to randomly get AI features that nobody asked for, these may be options that you want to look into. So now we are on to what I like to call the hot topic part of this video, which is also the last part of this video, which is some of my opinions and thoughts on things that are kind of being talked about a lot in bookish communities, and also solutions that I have for some of them. Now, like I said, this is quite a hot topic. These are just my opinions, and I am not going to be listing like individual creators at all. The issues that I have with a lot of the bookish sides of the internet are not with individual creators who are just making content. It is with the systems that we kind of push with the ideals that we have with these. And I wasn't going to make this part of the video because I didn't think anybody needed my opinion, but I wanted to talk about things like physical TBRs, so that's what I'm going to do now. Without any further ado, let me begin. And I'll start there. I'll start with physical TBRs. So I got back into reading last year. As I said at the start of this video, it has been a very, very long time since I read as many books as I did in 2025. So kind of along that way, I definitely fell down my own sort of influencer rabbit hole. And I went looking up, things on Book Talk and Bookstagram and BookTube, all of those book places. And one of the things that I just kept seeing was physical TBRs. And it made me, I'll be honest, I am not afraid to be honest on this channel. Watching these people do like huge book hauls, I was like, wow, like I'm not reading at that kind of level. Like I need to do like my bookshelves up, and I have to get them organized by color, and I need to get the ones with the sprayed edges. And it got to a point where I was having to like sit there with myself and be like, why? I am by no means completely anti-consumer. I think that we have to change a lot of systems before we can say that you're not consuming anything. So I am not going to come in and say that you shouldn't consume anything at all. I think that that is a lot to ask, particularly of people who are just trying to do their best right now. But I am very aware of what I spend my money on. I'm very aware of, my impact on the environment. And seeing people do, like, filling floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, or here's 100 books that I hauled, it was just one of those things where it kind of made me stop and think about my physical TBR myself. So in 2025, sorry, we're just switching the B-roll there to a different journal. But in 2025, I tried to do a bit more of a thoughtful consumer project, I guess. The very first thing I did was I unhauled my bookshelf. I I Marie Kondoed it, a bit like we were all doing back in 2020. I put away things that I didn't want anymore. I put them in a bag, and I basically divided my books into books that are like banned right now around the US, or books that I just think are important for people to have access to. So, like, I have a Judy Blume book, which I don't read anymore, but I think that that would be an important read for some people. So, those I went and donated to a little free library in my area. But my other books, where, like, my books are in mint condition, I don't write in my books, I try to be very careful with my books. So those books where they were like middle grade and I just didn't read them anymore, I actually took to a local used bookstore and I got a percentage of the cover price as store credit, and then I turned around and spent it at that bookstore. That to me was one of like the most important things I did last year, because I think it's nice to look at a full bookshelf. It's very satisfying. But I had all these books that were just sitting there collecting dust. Some of them weren't even middle grade. Like I had a copy of House of Leaves, and I didn't like that book. I could not finish that book. So it was just sitting there on my bookshelf collecting dust. I hadn't touched it for years. So I finally, like I said, just took it down to the bookstore, sold it, moved on with my life. So that was the biggest first thing that I did that I don't think you see people do book unhauls, but I think that you don't really know where those books are then going. So, like I said, I sold them to a local used bookstore, and I really like this bookstore a lot. I tried to find one where the books are then sold on at a fair price, because you do need to be very careful. A lot of places, Second and Charles looking at you, a lot of places will take the books, offer you a very meager amount, and then sell it for, almost close to buying it new. So with this physical bookshop in my area, I made sure that it was one where, it wasn't going to be sold on for tons and tons of money. And then any other books got donated to little free libraries in my area. So then it came the question of, how am I going to refill this bookshelf, but how am I also going to do so in a way that's maybe a little more conscious of my impact? And that was when I developed my little system of rules. So arguably book buying should be fun. I'm not scamming that. But I only hauled books if I knew I could do so in a way that was quite sustainable. So first of all, I only buy books that I'm absolutely certain that I'm going to reread. So Buckeye last year by Patrick Ryan, as soon as I read that book, I knew I wanted to read it again, and it was on like a months-long hold list at my library. So that one, it made sense. I ended up buying it at Barnes & Noble, which I don't love shopping at Barnes & Noble. I gotta be honest, I would much rather support a local bookstore, but nobody else around had the book, so I just sucked it up. It was on sale. I got it at Barnes & Noble. Same with things like Funny Story. I did enjoy that one a lot, and I actually got it on sale. I got the hardcover for like $8, I think it was, at Second and Charles. And it was actually cheaper than the paperback, the softcover. So that, again, was one where it was like, I'm not spending an excruciating amount of money, and these are books that I know I'm going to reread. I will also kind of allow myself to buy books at local used bookstores. As I've said, I think it's good to support local businesses. I think now more than ever, supporting your community is important, whether that's unhauling and giving back to local libraries, or that's being more aware of where you spend your money. Again, this one is a little bit privileged, I'm going to be honest. I know a lot of people don't live in an area where that's going to be something. You can't just go down to a local bookstore. I am very lucky and privileged in that was something I could do. And so that was kind of another way for me to spend my money, give back to the community, support local people in my area. And the only kind of other big haul that I did last year is library sales. So again, this is usually, well, I say this depends on where you live. This usually does happen. Most states, I think, in the US do this, where libraries are obviously going to have like a community, like a friends of the blah 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 library. sometimes they will do what are known as book bag sales, where you come and you buy a bag from the library and you can fill it with all of the books that you want. And so I did that actually last year. I went to one where you bought a bag for $10 and you could get anything you wanted that you could fit in the bag. So I got 15 books for $10. That one was one where I didn't know any of the books that I was getting. I literally went in and judged by cover. But again, that money went straight back to the library. It allowed them to get rid of books that they couldn't use anymore, that they couldn't keep on their shelves. And it also then allowed me to get new books. So I really, really liked that. I bring it up, like I said, because I think, particularly with TikTok, more than anything, I think creators really push a very heavy emphasis on consumerism with physical TBRs. I mean, there's some people that have more books on their physical TBR than I have on my shelf, So, and again, that I want to caveat, it is not about trying to tell people how to spend their money or anything like that. It is just more about making a consideration to what you're supporting, what you're watching, and the impacts of that. Like I said, for me, I had all these books that I either wasn't reading, so it didn't make sense to keep them, but then I don't have $500 to just go to a Barnes & Noble and buy every book that I think about. So by kind of limiting where I'm getting these, some of these are also just books that I've had for years, but I never got around to reading, so I've made a list so I can start checking them off. But that was kind of my little discussion on physical TBRs. So what I thought I would end this video on is a final discussion about consistency. So I struggle with consistency as a reader. I typically fall off the reading bandwagon in the first few months of the year, and then I'll pick it up in the summer and just read a ton of books, and then I won't read again for 6 months. So for me this year, it's about trying to keep up with consistency as opposed to trying to reach a numbers goal. I would just like it to become kind of second nature again, a bit like I talk about in my journaling videos where you just pick up your journal. I want to just pick up a book instead of picking up my phone. So for consistency, I already mentioned the kind of reading challenges, both the pot sugar and the 52 and 52. Those I'm hoping will kind of give me a bit of a push. So instead of being like, oh, well, I don't know what to read, I'll just go through, I have like a number spreadsheet I made, and I'll pick a book for a category and try and fit that in. I'm hoping that that'll make it so that it's not like a big difficult choice. I'm not having to scroll my TBR. I'm not having to go on Libby and sort through genres. I'm hoping that by having it already set up so I can just literally randomize what I read, it'll keep me reading even if I'm not feeling inspired to go out and select a book. And the last thing I'm doing with consistency, as I said, is the digital reading journal. By having like this innate desire to create and having a place where I want to build these spreads out, it's encouraging me to keep reading, because if I don't read, I can't make the pretty spreads. So, it's a double-edged sword, but I think it's a very fun way, and I'm looking forward to being a more consistent reader in 2026. So I wanted to end this video on just a little bit more of a serious ending. It's just kind of a last minute addition I made while I was editing this that I just thought I needed to say. I was nervous making this video, I'll be honest. I have said before that there have been, videos that I've uploaded where I have worried about the reception, particularly like when I do album unboxings for Enhypen, but in a very different way was I nervous about this one, because I think that there's a lot of unnecessary discourse in bookish communities. Books and reading are inclusive, period. They always have been, they always will be. It's the same kind of argument about reading is always political. I think that a lot of people are kind of moving away from that and are just starting discourse to start discourse. That's not to say that I don't think that there are some valid opinions out there. I think that there absolutely are. But my kind of fear with this is I think hating on each other for the way that people read is becoming more mainstream, and it's disappointing because it doesn't need to be like that. There are a lot of hobbies, I'll admit, that get a lot of toxic people coming and saying things about them, but with reading especially, it's disheartening to see the way that readers have discourse. So ending this video, and the reason I said that is, if you want to create bookish content, if you want to just post your reading roundup, your DNFs, the books you loved versus you didn't love, that is completely well within your right, and I hope that you won't let people stop you from doing that. Like I said about the reading discourse and, comments about whether someone's employed based on the amount of books they read, I think it's ridiculous. I mean, we have enough things to argue about as a world. Why are we picking books? And it got me thinking about, all of you guys in the comments that we have, in the discussions we have in the comments, that, if you want to create content, if you want to post content about books, please don't let other people's negative opinions sway you. A lot of times these opinions are not rooted in fact. People that are unemployed are not the only people that can read 100 books. Same as people that are, employed don't only read one. I hope that, given that this is what I do, I make all of these videos, I record week after week after week, and I voice over, and I was still nervous to put this out. I wanted to end it with saying that your accomplishments are just as important as anybody else's, and your social media space is completely yours. And if people take away that peace of mind from you, if people make you feel ashamed for the way that you are, the way that you read, you are well within your right to remove those people from the platform, and it's like I said, reading is always inclusive, and it doesn't matter if you read audiobooks, it doesn't matter if you read graphic novels, it doesn't matter if you're a self-help girly at heart. Whatever you read, you are welcome within the community, and I am disappointed that a lot of the bigger creators don't say that anymore, because I think it is important, and I think going into 2026, it's important to treat each other with kindness within these spaces, because I don't think a lot of people are doing that right now. Wow, I'm getting really sappy and emotional over here for no reason, but yeah, I just wanted to end on saying, this is kind of a new year, new me for Titleless Musings on the channel, and a new series. But, just you belong in the community as much as anybody else who is outspoken on whether or not audiobooks count as reading, which they do. They count as reading, just so that we're all aware of my stance on that. And I hope in 2026 that whatever goals you set for your reading, whether you want to read 3 books, whether you're going to read 250, whether you're not going to read a certain number of books, but you're going to go and do an author study, wherever you are with reading is completely fine. It is just as valid as anybody else, and you belong to the community and within the community just as much as they do. So with that all said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video here as I continue to make a physical TBR list. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy, please do remember to like and subscribe, as it really does help the channel. Feel free to share your thoughts with me down below if you've got book recommendations, if you've got book thoughts, if you've got bookish thoughts. I mean, all of these discussions I cannot wait to see us having in the comments. I love getting to read the comments, I love getting to talk to you guys, and I'm excited to hear what you guys think, especially since I haven't branched out into reading as a content form before. So yeah, I will go ahead and end it here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.